Hello, hi. Shout out to Cash for the super chat. Let's cut straight to the chase here. And shout out to everybody in the chat as well. There is a narrative which is being pushed regarding this Alexander Usyk Tyson Fury rematch. And that narrative is that Tyson Fury will have gained loads of confidence from the first fight. They're not talking about Usyk gaining any confidence. You might notice. No. They're just talking about Tyson Fury gaining massive amounts of confidence from the first fight. So let's just think this through, because I need some help here, people. Like, enlighten me here. So Tyson Fury went into the first fight against the smaller, older man, former cruiserweight. Tyson Fury kept saying he was a middleweight. Fury and his whole team were saying that he was going to stop Usyk. He was going to bully him, beat him up. And it would be over in 7 rounds or something. That's what his team was saying. So I have to imagine that's what they were aiming for. Maybe that's what Tyson Fury was expecting. Instead, he goes in there against the smaller, older man, gets pushed all around the ring, bullied all around the ring, gets hit with loads of big shots, more big shots than he's ever been hit with before in his whole career. He gets dropped, he gets hurt and nearly stopped, and then gets bullied for the remainder of the fight and loses on the scorecards. Explain to me how that fight went better than Tyson Fury expected it to go, because in order for you to gain confidence from a fight, then something unexpected would have to happen, whereby, it was easier than you thought it was going to be. If Tyson Fury lost, then how the hell was it easier than he thought it was going to be? Because he thought he was going to win. He thought he was going to win by stoppage. He thought he was going to be bossing the fight. Instead, the little middleweight was bossing him. I mean, explain this to me, people. Saint Don, you're a muppet. You're a muppet. Fool. Join the block party, you fanboy idiot. Yeah? Idiot. Let me stay on track here before these Fury fanboys start throwing a hissy fit. How the hell is Fury going to gain loads of confidence from this fight when he got bullied all around the ring by the older, smaller man who he was supposed to bully? How does that work? Someone explain it to me. This is not like an relatively inexperienced Anthony Yard, who didn't have much of an amateur background, going in there against a guy who was a beast in the amateurs in Artur Beterbiev, who was a reigning world champion. Because surely Anthony Yard wasn't sure deep down whether he was going to win the fight. There must have been a lot of doubts there because he was fighting a guy that was way above his pedigree. So Yard going in there and giving Beterbiev a tougher fight than many people expected. Yeah, he can take confidence from that. But Tyson Fury was in a very different situation against Usyk. Fury had been at the top of boxing for years and years and years. Again, he derided Usyk in the build-up, called him a middleweight. Him and his whole team were acting like they're going to stop the guy. You really think Tyson Fury expected to go in there and take all these punches? You seriously think Fury in his mind's eye, when he was envisioning the fight, thought he was going to get hit up like this, upside the head and beaten all around the ring? I mean, this is one of the weirdest things I've ever come across in boxing. This idea that Fury's going to gain loads of confidence. What, like Usyk isn't? Usyk won the fight. Let's reverse the situation, right? Let's look at the inverse. Alexander Usyk, the smaller, older man, went in there against the big Gypsy King, who outweighed him by like 40 pounds. And he went in there and bullied the guy, hurt the guy, dropped the guy. What, is Usyk not going to take any confidence? You'd think that Fury had won. The way people are talking about the confidence Fury's going to take from it, you'd think that Fury had won and he was the one that had dropped Usyk and bullied Usyk the whole night. No, Usyk is the one who did all the bullying. Usyk is the one who landed the vast majority of high impact punches, and he landed more punches overall in total anyway, but particularly the damaging shots. He landed the vast majority of damaging shots, and that's how you win fights. So, you know, even if for some strange reason Tyson Fury took confidence from the first fight, well, surely Usyk would have taken even more confidence than Tyson Fury took from it, because he won and he bullied the bigger, younger man, hurt him, dropped him. Therefore, there's no point even mentioning Tyson Fury gaining any confidence, because it's cancelled out by the confidence that Usyk would have gained, which is bound to be equal, if not more. It's kind of like this weird thing where they're all talking about the damage that Usyk took in the fight, as if Tyson Fury didn't take more damage. I mean, people, look at the slideshow on screen right now. I've looked at this fight so many times, taken screenshots of all the big punches I can find Tyson Fury landing. And I'm telling you, in terms of memorable big headshots, you can count them on one hand with Tyson Fury in the whole fight. Everything else was flicking jabs and, yeah, some nice body shots here and there. Shots that are partially landed on gloves. And yeah, that's what Fury was doing most of the fight. Usyk was the one landing the vast majority of clean power punches to the head. And he outlanded Fury to the body, by the way. Clean body shots. When have you ever seen Tyson Fury hurt like that? When have you ever seen Tyson Fury in so much trouble? When have you ever seen him get hit with that many shots? People talk about the Deontay Wilder fights damaging Fury. Yeah? Well, you don't think this fight damaged him? It's just, it is the most extraordinary thing. The way that Fury's supposed to have taken all these positives from a loss where he got beaten up by a smaller, older man, got hit with just an incredible amount of punches, nearly got knocked out. He's going to take loads of confidence from that, but Usyk's what? Going to take no confidence from actually winning, from being the guy who was delivering, dishing out most of the punishment. People, help me with this, because I'm really struggling. I don't get it. It's like the industry, obviously the Fury fanboys are desperate for Fury to win. We know that. But the industry is so desperate for a Fury win that they've convinced themselves that the guy who lost is going to be more confident going into the rematch than the guy who won. Imagine that. They think the guy who lost is going to be more confident. The guy who lost is going to be more confident than the guy who actually won. I mean, is this the Twilight Zone or what? Yeah, Usyk's going to gain no confidence from it at all, is he? Beating a man 40 pounds heavier than he is. What's the reach of Usyk? Like 78 inches or something? Tyson Fury's reach is like 85. He was outreached by this guy. Outweighed. You know, you got to figure that Fury's probably got more power. Yet Usyk was the one who scored the knockdown, who nearly got the stoppage. You don't think Usyk takes tremendous confidence from the fact that he hurt Fury in there and nearly had him out? You don't think Usyk takes tremendous confidence from the fact that despite having a rough patch in the middle of the fight, he still came back against the guy with a very strong will in Tyson Fury? And oh yes, Tyson Fury has a strong will. But Usyk overcame Tyson Fury's tremendously strong will and all his physical advantages to nearly take him out in the 9th round and bully him for the rest of the fight. Tyson Fury finished the fight in the 12th round on the back foot, getting backed up, getting hit upside the head. What, Usyk's not going to take any confidence from that, nah? This narrative is so weird. Honestly, it's so weird. Yeah. Luke Partridge is the one who's going to take all the confidence. Imagine that. Wayne Fitness says, and they keep talking about Usyk having a broken jaw, which he never had, of course. Usyk had an issue with his tooth, which he's had for a long time, which he's been an issue for him in previous fights. That was confirmed by Alex Krasuk. And that's what they went. In fact, he didn't even want to go to the hospital because they knew what the issue was. But because the Saudis are new to boxing, their medical team out there, they insisted he go to the hospital and have it checked out. The tooth issue. Went to the hospital. It was just a tooth thing, no problem, no broken jaw. But of course, Team Fury is so desperate, they jumped on it and started lying, saying he had a broken jaw and a fractured orbital and all this kind of stuff. I mean, give it a rest. Honestly. You know, they rely so much on lies, Fury's team. And I just feel like, from a psychological standpoint, they're not putting themselves in the best space by relying on skullduggery, lies, dishonesty to try and get the upper hand. If they really want to win, then they're going to have to be upfront and honest. I think they give themselves a better chance in terms of the mentality going into the fight. Sam Greer says Fury was Usyk's toughest heavyweight fight. Okay, what's your point? You're not making a point. I guess you're just fanboying for Fury. What's your point? Yeah, it was Usyk's toughest heavyweight fight. Okay. And he still won against the bigger, younger guy, outweighed him by 40 pounds, longer reach. And of course, Stephen Whitemore makes the counter, the perfect counter. It was Fury's toughest fight, despite Fury lying and saying it wasn't. No, that was his toughest. That's the toughest fight he's ever had. We've never seen Fury in that kind of trouble before. Not even against Wilder. Not even against Wilder. Okay, we got another Tyson Fury fanboy saying Usyk got a 45-day suspension after the fight. Fury got no suspension at all. These are facts. Fury lost the fight. Are you still crying into your pillow at night because Fury lost the fight? A 45-day suspension because of what? These guys are just talking rubbish. They've probably been onto BoxRec. You know, BoxRec, they put up these things where commission suspends somebody. That's like a standard thing on, but they're probably taking it. Oh, you got suspended. You guys are so butthurt and you're so traumatized by your hero, Luke Partridge, getting beaten up by the middleweight and losing the fight, that you're clutching at so many straws. It's unbelievable. Oh, Usyk got suspended and Fury didn't. Usyk had a broken jaw, which he never had. You guys are pathetic. Seriously. You guys are seriously pathetic. Luke Partridge got bashed up by the little middleweight, the rabbit who he said he was going to, beat up. And he's going to gain confidence from it, is he? How? So Usyk's going to gain no confidence from... Look at the images on screen and tell me how Tyson Fury takes confidence from that. The little man, the little middleweight, wasn't supposed to be able to hurt him. He wasn't supposed to be able to push him back and bully him. He wasn't supposed to be able to have him in trouble and nearly knock him out. That wasn't supposed to happen. Thank you, the preloader. Fury went into hiding for weeks to hide his battered appearance so they could say Usyk looked hurt. Who appeared publicly sooner after the fight? It was Usyk. He went on a podcast with Steve Kim about 2 weeks after the fight. 3 weeks after the fight. The first we saw of Tyson Fury after the fight was him face planting outside a pub. That's the first public appearance we saw from Fury after the fight. Usyk was right there out in the open. Yeah? On Steve Kim's podcast. Where was Fury at? Oh yeah, Fury. Usyk looked in such a bad way, didn't he? That he was doing podcasts. With his alleged broken... I mean, honestly, you Fury fans, you're birds of a feather, because Tyson Fury is a liar, a gaslighter, and you guys are all liars and gaslighters as well. Pushing all these fake, phony, false narratives to try and make yourselves feel better. Give it a rest. Seriously, get a grip and give it a rest. No, Sam Greer, you are a Fury fanboy. You are. You're trying to disguise it. You're trying to gaslight. Typical Fury fanboy. You're a fanboy. Because I come with facts to counter this bizarre narrative that somehow Fury's going to take loads of confidence from the fight. What, getting beaten up by a smaller, older man? How do you gain confidence from that? And you say, oh no, this and that happened. And man, you're an idiot. Sam Gray, you're an idiot. You're an idiot, man. I'm not good to listen to live. You're not good to listen to at all. That's why nobody follows you. Idiot. Come out of my chat room, fool. You're an idiot. How many subscribers you got, Sam Greer? Idiot. Anyway, I wanted to tackle this because that's what they're pushing on TalkSport. Wherever you look, this is the narrative they're pushing. Fury's gained so much confidence. Somebody please, see, as soon as I've countered this narrative with obvious logic, nobody in the chat has been able to explain to me how this narrative even makes sense. So anybody who's still in the chat, right? Put all your Fury fanboyisms aside. Explain to me in the chat how Tyson Fury is supposed to have gained confidence from what happened to him here on screen. As if Usyk wouldn't have gained more confidence. Therefore, what's the point in mentioning Tyson Fury's confidence? Because it's cancelled out by Usyk's confidence boost. God damn it all. Unbelievable. Jelly Mode says, Hatman, did you see the interview with Fury and Usyk when they watched back the fight and Fury insisted that there was nothing wrong with his nose after Bunsey pointed out the footage of him dabbing it? And that's why Usyk said that he wasn't hurt by Fury. Usyk was hurt by Fury in the 6th round. But because Fury was there lying, Usyk was like, okay, if we're playing that game, then I'm going to say I wasn't hurt by you either, if you're going to play that game. Yeah, that's all Usyk was. He was a mirror for Tyson. He's like, okay, you want to play funny games and act like I didn't hurt you and your nose wasn't busted. Okay, yeah, you hit me with the uppercut and it didn't hurt. That's why he smiled afterwards. And of course, the Fury fans are jumping on it. Usyk's lying. He said he was never hurt. Tyson Fury, if I had a pound for every time Tyson Fury's been caught lying, I'd be a multi-billionaire. And so Usyk, amidst this tidal wave of lies that Tyson Fury is telling, he says, okay, I'll humor Tyson Fury now. And I'll say, you know what? You didn't hurt me with the uppercut. And you jump on Usyk and say, oh, he's a liar. I mean, you gotta laugh at these people. They're so desperate. It's unreal. It is unreal. Shout out to Alex for the super chat. He says, is his name actually Luke Partridge? Well, his name's Luke. I remember early on during his career going on his BoxRec page and Luke was his first name and Tyson was his middle name. Just the same way that Huey Fury's first name is Huey, his middle name is Lewis, named after Lennox Lewis. Yeah? That's how John Fury and Peter named their sons. They gave them the middle name of their favorite boxer. Peter Fury's favorite boxer was Lennox Lewis, so he gave his son Huey Lewis as the middle name. And John Fury's favorite boxer was Mike Tyson, so he gave his son Luke Tyson as the middle name. But for marketing purposes, they switched it around, and I've got no issue with them doing it, by the way. I think Tyson is a better name. It has more power to it than Luke. So I've got no issue with them doing it. But they switched his middle and first name around. As far as Partridge, it is alleged that the original family name is Partridge. I don't know whether that's actually true. Okay, but it's alleged. I did an episode a couple streams back where I showed this blog post where this guy appeared to have lots of inside knowledge about John Fury in particular. I mean, a lot of details which you wouldn't have imagined that somebody could just make up from thin air. But who knows? I can't verify it. I don't know who wrote the post, but it was a post from back in 2015 on the BoxRec forum. And it was alleged that the family name was originally Partridge. And if that's true, then Tyson Fury's name would actually be Luke Partridge. Shout out to someone for the super chat. He says, are Fury fans now the worst in boxing? They're not the worst I've ever encountered. But in terms of the active fighters right now, yes, the Fury fans are the worst. As far as active fighters today. But I've come across worse fanboys than the Fury fanboys. Okay, Taylor said, okay, Hatman, but let's not forget the middle rounds where Usyk was getting outboxed quite convincingly. Usyk doesn't necessarily switch off, so that should give heart to Fury if he ain't a clown. Yes, Tyson Fury was bossing those 3 rounds in the middle of the fight, 4, 5, 6. But then Usyk adjusted. You know, if Fury had got in control of the fight for those middle rounds and maintained control for longer, then he could have taken confidence, right? At the end of the day, Tyson Fury as a fighter is going to have to, if he wants to win the fight, take confidence from something, right? He's going to have to find something to build his confidence back up off. So yeah, he's going to focus on those middle rounds and try and replicate what he did in those middle rounds from the start of the rematch. Of course, he's going to try and do that. But again, he had 3 rounds in the middle of the fight where he was really dominant and effective. Outside of those 3 rounds, that was it. Not even round 7. See, round 7 was a very competitive round. Some of the screenshots on screen in this slideshow are from round 7, where Usyk was landing big shots on Fury. Fury did land a big uppercut in round 7. But Usyk also landed a big left hand that mashed up Fury's nose in round 7. And I think a right hook as well. Round 7 was competitive. It wasn't a dominant round for Fury at all. Round 6 was. Yeah, so really it was 3 rounds in the middle of the fight where Fury was dominating. But Usyk made the adjustments. How much confidence can you take when a guy is able to adjust that quick? When you think you're on top, when you think you're dominating, when you think that victory is certain, and the guy adjusts. Usyk started stepping more to his right before he came in for his attacks. And that forced Fury to throw his uppercut across his body more, and that dissipated the power of it. He ended up missing the uppercut. So Usyk adjusted so that Fury couldn't land the uppercut anymore. Not with the same power anyway. That's what happened. And as well as adjusting, Fury started to slow down because of the pressure from Usyk. And that's why he started getting caught more. So Usyk neutralized Fury's uppercut and he started landing more punches. How does Fury take confidence from that? He's in there with a guy who adjusts to what he's doing. Usyk isn't just gonna, fold as soon as you find something that works. He's going to make adjustments on the fly. It's exactly what he did. It's exactly what he's always been doing his whole career. Usyk has had slow starts in fights before. That's nothing new. Although, for my money, he won the first 3 rounds against Fury. At least 2 of the first 3 rounds he won. But he's had slow starts in fights before. Look at the Michael Hunter fight. Michael Hunter was getting the better of it. In some of the rounds in the first half of that fight. Hunter was getting the better of it. Myris Breedis, for my money, that's the closest fight Usyk's ever had, the Breedis fight. It wasn't as fit. See, let's cover this thing about Fury being Usyk's toughest opponent. Yeah, physically, that was the most grueling, toughest fight that Usyk's been through because of the size of Fury, because of those middle rounds where Fury did damage, because of how hard Usyk had to work to get close to a man with a reach like that, who's moving about and throwing shots back and hitting him in the body. I'm not sure anyone in Usyk's career has made such a concerted effort to go to his body as Tyson Fury did in their first fight. So yes, physically, it was Usyk's toughest fight. There's no question about it. But in terms of rounds 1, I think the Breedis fight was the closest fight of Usyk's career. I thought the Breedis won more rounds than Fury did. But yeah, there's a difference between the closest fight in terms of rounds 1 and the toughest fight physically. Shout out to Cash for the super chat. He said, on Fury versus Cunningham fight, the announcer called him Luke Tyson Fury. This was just before Fury walked out. Thank you for that bit of information there. I never realized that. Shout out to Cash every time. Interesting. I'll have to go back and watch that. But I do distinctly remember early on in Tyson Fury's career, going to his BoxRec page and his first name was Luke. Luke Partridge. Shout out to Alex for the super chat. He says, was Ali a liar like Fury? Noticed he lie on things. Was Ali a liar like Fury? No, not to the same extent as Fury. No, not as far as I can recall. I mean, I wasn't alive when Ali was in his heyday. I watched Ali growing up in the 1980s. I had family members, obviously, who were big fans of Ali on video cassette, and they would still show documentaries about his fights. Sometimes they'd show his full fights in the 80s. So I grew up watching Ali in the 80s, and he talked a lot of trash, and he said a lot of things that many people don't like. But in terms of just lying constantly like Tyson Fury, no. Tyson Fury is the most prolific liar I have ever seen in boxing as far as a fighter. The only people that are more prolific liars than Tyson Fury would be promoters and managers and people like that. But as far as fighters, I've never seen a fighter in my life who lies as often and as egregiously as Tyson Fury. Never seen anything like it. And it amazes me that Fury's fans and his supporters and all this kind of stuff and the media just allow Fury's lies to just, they sweep it all under the rug. It's incredible. Action Popcar says, don't forget politicians. Well, yeah, politicians, but I'm talking about, within the boxing industry. In boxing, you could only say promoters lie more than Fury. Other than promoters, honestly, Fury is the most prolific liar I have ever seen. And, for the people who support Tyson Fury, if it was a thing where they just really like his boxing ability, I could say, okay, fine. But the people who say they like Tyson Fury's boxing, the people who support him, they're constantly banging on about how fake AJ is, and how Usyk talks like Borat, and how, you know, they've got all these ad hominem attacks for Fury's rivals. So it's obviously not just about boxing ability, is it? Or else they wouldn't be so disrespectful towards Fury's rivals. No. They like Fury's personality, and I am baffled by how people can be so in love with a man who tells so many lies and who's so dishonest. Like, what does that say about them? That's why they come here to my live stream and start gaslighting and BSing in the live chat. Because birds of a feather flock together. Tyson Fury's a liar, a gaslighter, and so he attracts people who are the same. Shout out to Ocean Blue for the super chat. Much respect, big up every time. Says, big up Hatman, got an early start, so catch you on the next one. Big up Ocean Blue. And, you know, I'm often misconstrued when it comes to Tyson Fury, because yes, I criticize him a lot because there's a lot to criticize. When a guy lies and messes around as much as Tyson Fury does, how can you not criticize? When he kicks the can down the road and, you know, avoids fights and lies about the reason that certain fights didn't happen, how can you not criticize? It's bad for boxing, many of the things that Tyson Fury has done. But that doesn't mean I don't think Tyson Fury is an excellent fighter, because I do. You've never heard me on this channel ever say that Tyson Fury is rubbish and he's no good. I've never said that. Not a day in my life have I ever said Tyson Fury's no good. In fact, early on in Tyson Fury's career, when I was making videos about him, from around the Kevin Johnson fight is when I really started talking about him. And back then, some of you guys may remember, YouTube channels had a very different format, and you could actually customize the layout of your page far more than you can now. And you could basically, somebody's YouTube page functioned like a website, basically, like their own private mini website, right? So you could watch all of somebody's videos and never actually leave their page. Right, so you'd have the main player, and you can have a playlist down the side, and as it went through the playlist, it would remain on your page with your customized wallpaper and all that kind of stuff. And so the way I had it laid out is I had comments, right? Like the community comment section, yeah? I had that underneath the main player on my page. So people could comment on anything, and I would see the comments as soon as I landed on my page. Right? And there was some young lady. I'm saying young, I don't know how young she was, but it was a lady anyway. And she used to relentlessly comment on my page about how I was giving Tyson Fury far too much credit. She said, I've never seen a guy so ungainly in the ring. I don't know what you see in him, Hatman. I can't understand why you don't just write him off and say that, yeah, I can't believe you were impressed by the Kevin Johnson fight. That's what she was saying on my page years ago. You know, and I was quite impressed by Fury against Kevin Johnson. I thought he looked very talented in that fight. I wasn't impressed with him in the McDermott fights, but for the Johnson fight, I was like, okay, now I can see what some of these people are saying about this guy. He looked quite impressive there. Right? So I've always rated Tyson Fury's ability. I've never thought he was rubbish. My critiques of Tyson Fury are mainly to do with his skullduggerous behavior, his lying, his avoiding fights and then pointing the finger at the guy he avoided and saying that he's the one that ducked. You know, all that kind of carry on. When he says he's going to fight people for free at Wembley and then he fights Derek Chisora and charges a record high pay-per-view. That kind of stuff. See, I'm a boxing fan. If you are a true... Here's what I'm going to tell you now. If you are a true boxing fan and you've never criticized Tyson Fury for all the stuff I've just mentioned, then you are not a true boxing fan at all. You're a Tyson Fury fanboy trying to masquerade as a real boxing fan, because a real boxing fan would know that so many of the things that Tyson Fury has done throughout his career have been bad for boxing. If you cared that much about boxing, you'd be calling him out on these things. But the fact that you don't shows me that you're a fanboy. You're not a true boxing fan, or else you'd be calling him out on these things just like I've been calling him out. And I get accused of being a hater. Well, let me tell you what I hate. I hate when fighters lie and deceive the public time and time and time and time and time and time and time again. It wouldn't bother me so much if there wasn't a large swathe of the public that actually fell for it. And of course, the boxing media mostly fall for it. It wouldn't bother me so much if people were not buying the BS that Fury was selling. Unfortunately, they are. You know, I've been on YouTube for over a decade. It's about 14 years now on a couple of different channels. And my channel has gone through phases where there was the Mayweather era. There was the David Haye time. Carl Froch was still fighting at one point. And I was labeled, first of all, the first fighter that I remember being labeled a hater of was probably Mike Tyson. Because one of the first videos I ever did on YouTube was about Mike Tyson. And I got all these Tyson fanatics rocking up on my channel. You know, tough guys. There was some guy, I mean, he had a Greek name. I'll never forget it. He had a Greek name. And he rocked up on this video I did about Mike Tyson 14 years ago. And he started talking to me like he was Scarface. You know Tony Montana in the film Scarface? And he said, I'm going to carve you up real nice. He was literally taking lines out of Scarface and using them to talk to me. And this is, you know, in much earlier phase of the internet. So I had all these weird Mike Tyson fans coming at me sideways. Also Rocky Marciano fans. Yeah, I had some encounters with Marciano fans in the early days of my YouTube channel. And so, yeah, I came across them first. And then I want to say it might have been some Carl Froch fans who didn't like a few of my criticisms, like when Carl Froch avoided Adonis Stevenson, which he did at 168. I mentioned that. Got a load of hate for that. Then, of course, there was the Klitschko fanboys who were coming at me sideways. There was the David Haye fanboys. Again, back then, I would get accused of being a David Haye fanboy and accused of being a Klitschko fanboy in the comments of the same videos. People just couldn't understand objectivity. Yeah, Vladimir Klitschko did a lot of BS, but David Haye avoided him for like 2 years while he was milking his WBA belt. That also happened. So I'm going to call out what's actually happening. David Haye was taking the mick. He was taking the biscuit. He pulled out of the Vitaly Klitschko fight to instead take an easier fight against Valaev. And then he ran around milking his WBA belt for 2 years. He fought Audley Harrison. And you know, when he took the Harrison fight, he actually had the nerve to come out and say the reason he's fighting Audley is because that's the fight that the public want more than any other fight. That's the fight they want more than Klitschko. So I was calling all these things out, and people were saying that I'm a massive David Haye hater. That's what they were calling me, a David Haye hater. Okay. And then, of course, there was the Mayweather era where I was calling out Mayweather's BS, which I talked about on yesterday's stream, a lot of Mayweather's BS. I got labeled a massive hater of Mayweather. I had all these Americans, especially black Americans, coming to my channel, calling me every name under the sun, Coconut and Uncle Tom, and all this kind of stuff, because I dared to criticize the god Floyd Mayweather. That's why I did a famous video, which longtime subscribers will remember, called Floyd is Jesus, where I did like an American accent. I did a parody of a Mayweather fanboy. Videos, it's still up on YouTube. Floyd is Jesus, part 1 and part 2. I think part 1's a bit funnier than part 2. But yeah, I did like an impression of a typical Mayweather fanboy YouTuber from that era. And this went on for years, folks. It wasn't like a couple months where I was called a Mayweather hater. It went on for years of me being called a Mayweather hater and people coming at my neck. Because when you're objective and when you mete out criticism appropriately, i.e. the punishment has to fit the crime, when you do that, everybody's going to come at you. From all corners of the boxing community, everyone's going to have it in for you. And so, yeah, I was accused of being a Mayweather hater for years, a David Haye hater, haters of all these different fighters. And it just so happens that the latest group are the Tyson Fury fanboys. According to them, I'm a Fury hater. I hate the guy and this and that and the other. Whatever. Shout out to Frankie for the super chat. He says, Fury becoming popular with the British public, finished him as a real fighter. Ego couldn't handle the popularity. That's a good comment. That's a good comment. Fury wanted to, I think he's always had that deviousness in him and that dishonesty in him, but it came out when he became popular, as you say, with the British public. That's when he thought, aha, I've made it now. Now I don't really need to take on the toughest challenges every time because they're giving me all the plaudits. They're calling me the greatest heavyweight of my generation. Some people are calling me the greatest heavyweight of all time when I haven't actually proved it. So I don't need to prove it. Why go in the ring and build up some Muhammad Ali or Lennox Lewis or Joe Louis type resume? I don't need to. They're telling me I'm better than those guys without having that kind of resume. And that was one of my bugbears for years. I said that for so long. You don't give a guy credit that he hasn't earned in the ring. And if you thought that Tyson Fury had earned the credit that Lennox Lewis had earned, well, you must be insane. Seriously, the resumes are not even close. Yeah, shout out to Frankie Coffee Cake for the super chat. Marie says, I feel like YouTube commentators are generally less unhinged now than they were 15 years ago. Depends how you define unhinged. You know, depends how you define unhinged. But I guess YouTube was a more wild place back in the days. In many ways, it was more wild. There was less censorship and, you know, it was a more wild place. There wasn't so many community guideline strikes and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Okay, we got some idiot in the chat here called Alex. Your mom and dad are brother and sister. That's how you end up the way you are. I got no sympathy for you. Goozy says the LDBC are unhinged. Yeah, I mean, during the Wilder years, when Wilder was WBC champion, the LDBC were, I mean, you know, I had a fun time trolling them with all the thumbnails I used to make about Wilder fans and all that kind of stuff. I had a fun time trolling the Wilder fans. They were crazy. And that's another thing, of course, that the Tyson Fury fanboys forget. See, if I hated Tyson Fury that much, then how come I didn't support all of the ridiculous accusations that Deontay Wilder made against Tyson Fury after their second fight? If I was just this guy hell-bent on hating Fury, then how come I didn't say, yeah, Fury cheated in the second? How come I didn't say any of that? How come I came out and said, you know what? Deontay Wilder is talking absolute rubbish. He's delusional. His fans are delusional. All of these accusations he's coming out with are the most out there psychedelic nonsense I've ever heard. He's the worst and sorest loser I've ever seen in box. That's what I was saying about Wilder. I wasn't just jumping, piling on Fury and joining the LDBC. No. See, I go with what the truth is, or at least what I perceive the truth to be. When Tyson Fury's been in the right, when his opponents, when his rivals have been in the wrong, then I've sided with Fury. As I've said so many times, there is such a thing as repeat offenders. When it comes to lying and misleading the public, Tyson Fury is a repeat offender, a serial offender. So what am I supposed to do? Ignore it? Okay, this guy here says, as much as I love Usyk, Fury dominated rounds 3 to 7. Could have been different if he never got caught. Always told AJ fanboys that Fury is better than AJ. Okay, there's several problems with your comment. First of all, Fury did not dominate 3 to 7. That is absolute nonsense. Nonsense. Fury dominated from rounds 4 to 6. 3 rounds. Where on earth are you getting the idea that he dominated round 7? He was getting caught with big shots in round 7. That was a very competitive round. You could have easily given it to Usyk. And dominated round 3? Specsavers. And as far as it could have been different if he never got caught, why did he get caught? Have you asked yourself that question? What, you think it was a random lucky punch? No. It wasn't a random lucky punch. And it couldn't have been different. Tyson Fury was always going to get caught because he was getting tired. And because Usyk adjusted defensively to avoid Fury's uppercut after the 7th round. Fury was getting tired because of Usyk's pressure, because of his body shots. He's not used to having to work constantly like that. And think, it's the energy that having to think as much as you do when you fight Usyk that also drains you. He constantly keeps you thinking and moving and all this kind of stuff. Tyson Fury was bound to get caught under that type of... It was inevitable. It wasn't some random punch that came out of the blue. This ridiculous narrative that Fury fanboys are trying to come up with. No, it was never that. He was getting caught in round 7. He was getting caught in round 8. And then he finally got seriously hurt in round 9. It's not just one random punch. You are delusional if you're running with that narrative. And as far as you always told the AJ fanboys that Fury was better than AJ, Fury's never fought AJ. I've been saying for the last year, if Fury and AJ did fight, I'd be picking Fury. But that's just an opinion. You don't prove that you're better than somebody in your era. One of the champions for a time based upon opinions. No, you prove it by getting in the ring and fighting him. So I might think that Fury's better than AJ. You might think it, but he hasn't proven it in the ring by actually getting in there and beating him. So that's all just conjecture. But as far as the way the first fight went, no, Fury dominated 3 rounds in the fight. 4, 5, 6. That's when he dominated. Outside of that, he didn't dominate anything. That's the reality of it. Look at the slideshow on screen. Many of these screenshots are from rounds 3, 2, round 1, round 7, and of course the middle rounds, the 4, 5, 6 when Fury dominated. The man dominated 3 rounds and you're acting like he had it all under control. No. He was getting worn down by pressure and body shots. That's why he got caught repeatedly, not one punch. He kept getting caught in the 7th, got caught even more in the 8th, got caught even more in the 9th. It wasn't some random punch out the blue. Okay? Let that sink in. Let that reality hit you. That's what he's got to deal with in the rematch. Somebody that he's going to have to try and keep off of him, presuming Fury doesn't go forward and try to take the fight to him. I think that's his best bet, to be honest. Because he's never going to match Usyk for fitness. I mean, forget about it. That's never going to happen. And if you can't match a guy for fitness, then you need to find a way to bring his punch output down and control the pace of the fight. You're not going to control the pace of the fight boxing on the back foot. That way Usyk can control the pace. He can attack when he wants to attack, right? You need to control the pace. You need to keep Usyk guessing. Put him on his heels. That's my take on it anyway. Marie says, what does LDBC stand for? It stands for, I think, Lions Den Boxing Community. I think that's what it stands for. You know, there was a period where a lot of my subscribers and my patrons and people in my private chat group on Element and previously on Discord, they would come to me on an almost daily basis and they would tell me about something that the LDBC guys were saying. I don't watch LDBC channels. I don't watch them. So I wasn't particularly interested in what, I mean, I would get a certain gist for what they were saying if it pertained to because some of the stuff that I was hearing that they were saying was so silly, I didn't even bother addressing it. But from time to time, based upon comments on my channel that I saw in the comment section of my videos, I'd respond to the Wilder fans in that regard. But in terms of like the ins and outs of the LDBC, I never followed them channels, so didn't really care. I mean, I feel like it would have been a waste of my time listening to a bunch of guys talk rubbish. You know, that's the way I always felt about it. I'm not interested. Okay, this guy says, I'm actually a Usyk fan, but you don't give Fury enough credit. It was a close fight and a split decision. No, I give Fury as much credit as he deserves. The split decision was the industry. It should never have been a split decision. Fury won conclusively 3 rounds. You could have given him maybe 1 or 2 more rounds. Let's say you gave him the 12th or a round outside of that. Maybe you gave him the 7th. I gave Fury 4 rounds in the fight. At a push, you could give him 5. If you're giving Fury more than 5 rounds, seriously, I don't know what's wrong with you. And with the knockdown, that extends the lead for Alexander Usyk. But Fury is so good with the showboating. He got people to think that showboating meant he was winning the fight. There are people to this day who think that Fury won the first round. How on earth did he win the first round when the only one landing any clean big shots was Usyk? I mean, how does that even work? But again, Fury is so good at bamboozling people, and the industry was so desperate for Tyson Fury to win. That's what the split decision was all about. The split decision was BS. Usyk knocked the guy down, and he landed the vast majority of impactful punches throughout the fight. And somehow honestly, that judge who scored it for Fury, he needs to be looked at seriously. Even the judge that only had Usyk winning by a round, that's scandalous in itself. The industry, somebody earlier on in the chat, shout out to Charles for the super chat. He says, love the channel. What do you think of this potential matchup between Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker? I'll come on to that in a second, but yeah, when S.A, good comment. He says, when dudes say I'm actually an Usyk fan, but you know it's going to be followed by a lie. Exactly that. So, yeah, let me get to the super chat first. Daniel Dubois versus Joseph Parker. Look, Daniel Dubois did fantastically well, wiping the floor with Anthony Joshua, beating Hrgovic, beating Miller. I mean, it's been one of the best comebacks I've seen in heavyweight boxing for a long time, because after that Usyk fight, you could definitely have been forgiven for thinking that he was finished, quitting again, you know, a couple years after he quit against Joyce. So Dubois really has impressed with the way he's been able to come back and get his mind right, firing on all cylinders. Joseph Parker is a vet. He's still relatively young, early 30s. I think Parker's got the movement to give Dubois some issues. But ultimately, I think Dubois' will, and his will is very strong now, you know, coming off the back of all these wins. I think his will be too strong for Joseph Parker personally. I think his will be too strong because, you know, you go back to when Joseph Parker fought Dillian Whyte. Whenever Parker's been dragged into a dogfight, if he can't, you know, if boxing isn't working for Parker and he's dragged into a dogfight, when does he ever come out on top? Because the Wilder fight and the Zhang fight, they weren't dogfights. They were fights where Parker's boxing was working. But when his boxing ain't working and he's forced into the trenches, when does he ever come out on top? He didn't come out on top against Dillian Whyte. And so that's what Daniel Dubois is going to aim to do. He's going to aim to walk him down with a jab, drag him into a dogfight. And I think Dubois will get it. I mean, maybe Parker hits him with something and uses his slickness because Parker's the faster guy, at least in terms of hand speed. Dubois got quick feet. And Parker is the more fluid of the two, for sure. He's the more experienced. He's tough. But Dubois is pretty tough too. So I would lean towards Daniel Dubois in the fight, personally. I think that Zhang would be a more dangerous fight for Dubois. Stylistically, the southpaw, massive guy. He'd be much more difficult to manhandle. And, you know, the way the angles line up, could Dubois, who's very upright, who's got a very, you know, wide open guard, could he avoid that big Chinese left hand? That's a dangerous fight. Very dangerous. I think that's more dangerous than the Parker fight, personally. And then you got Martin Okolie, who I also think is very dangerous for Daniel Dubois. But it remains to be seen what kind of chin Martin Okolie's got. He was stopped by Michael Hunter. Yes, it was many years ago. Billy Nelson's still reeling off the excuses, but he was stopped by Michael Hunter. Never went down in the fight, and he did take an awful lot of punishment. But he was stopped. And since that time, has Martin Okolie ever really fought a serious puncher? I mean, Jared Anderson can punch, but he's not like an elite level puncher, is he? He can't hit like Zhang. So, and he can't, I would say he can't hit like Dubois. So what happens when Okolie, who doesn't have a great defense, what happens when he gets clipped by Dubois? Maybe he can take it for a little while, but if it keeps on happening, you know, I think it's a fascinating fight. I might even edge towards Okolie, but yeah, to me, that's a more dangerous fight than Parker. I'm not saying Parker's got no chance, but if I had to put it in a percentage, I would give Joe Parker about a 30% chance against Daniel Dubois, maybe 35 at a push. I just don't think, as tough as he is and as slick as he is, I don't think he'll be able to handle Dubois' aggression. I expect he'll do better than AJ in terms of last longer. I don't think he'll be getting dropped as early as, I could be wrong, but I don't think he'll be getting dropped as early as AJ. Parker is more resilient than AJ, I think. He's got a better chin. I think he's more physically robust, more psychologically robust. But the problem for Parker is he's always lacked a bit of meanness in a firefight. You know, when someone drags, as I say, when somebody drags him into the trenches and makes it ugly, Parker doesn't tend to come out on top. You know, he's an example of maybe of somebody who's a bit too nice to succeed at the highest level long term. We got Jim McDonald in the chat. He was always a funny character in Coronation Street, Jim McDonald. Leo says Hatman rematches usually end quicker than the first fight. I see Fury getting stopped earlier, like Zhang Joyce. Could happen. Duke McKenzie seems to think that's what's going to happen. I I mean, although I think it could happen, contrary to what some of these Fury fanboys who are very thinly veiled and thinly disguised are trying to say, I give Fury enough credit to say that I don't think he'll get stopped early. He could get stopped early. It depends on how much the damage he took in the first fight has affected him. You know, he could get stopped early, but I tend to think if Fury's going to get stopped, it might be middle rounds, there or thereabouts. And I give Fury a good chance of winning, by the way. As I said in the previous live stream, I'll give Fury about a 40% chance of winning, which is pretty high. And that's what the odds makers have it. The bookies have Usyk about a 60% favorite. So 60-40 in Usyk's favor. I see it about that as well. I do lean towards Usyk in the rematch, but I give Fury a decent chance, a pretty good chance, if he can get his tactics right. It's all about tactics. If he's just going to box the same way as he did last time, forget about it. He'll just have a puncher's chance in that scenario, especially if he's coming in heavier, because he'll be more stationary. But if he's going to be more aggressive, strategic aggression, then I give him a decent chance, 40% chance in the fight, which is not a little chance, it's a realistic chance. So, a shout out to M1 Life for the super chat. He says, Simon Jordan keeps making reference to Fury being past his best. He doesn't afford Usyk the same luxury. Any fights you wish had been 15 rounds instead of 12. Parker, bad style for Usyk. Thank you for the super chat. There was somebody else here who said that I missed their super chat. So I'll come back onto yours in a second. There was a super chat from Charles, who I spoke about his super chat. Deep Random Thinker, thank you for your super chat. I think I missed this one. He said, would you consider Usyk as a boxing superstar now? No. No, Usyk is not a boxing superstar. He's, of course, more well-known than he was prior to beating all these UK heavy. He's come and cleaned out our heavyweights, right? So, of course, he's more well-known. But you know what it's like in this day and age. Today, it's about personality more than ever before. And boxing, particularly in the, most of the money in boxing is in the Anglo sphere, right? There are some markets outside of there where you can be a star, such as in the Latino community, places like Mexico and so on. Canelo Alvarez, very popular, but he still plies his trade in the Anglo sphere, in the United States for the most part, right? Although Spanish is spoken very widely in the United States, I'm aware of that. But my point is, no, Usyk, I wouldn't define him as a superstar, no. I wouldn't. He's a star, a superstar, no. He's not at the level of Fury in terms of his commercial value and his notoriety. He's not at the level that AJ was. He's nothing like Canelo, so he's not a superstar. It's not his fault. He's a victim of circumstances. You know, he was born in a part of the world where there isn't much by way of big professional boxing shows going on, and obviously there's a lot of issues in his country right now, and he fights primarily in the Anglosphere against Anglosphere fighters, and he doesn't speak much English, so it's very difficult to become a superstar under those circumstances, you know. But shout out to Deep Random Thinker for the super chat. Let's see if there's any other super chats I missed. Okay, yeah, there was a super chat here from Taylor. Thank you for your super chat as well. He says Fury is Lawrence Okolie on champion mode on fight night. The hugs are more stylish, the reach is used better, and the interviews sell you a fake story. I mean, that's an interesting take, Taylor. Personally, I quite like the Okolie story because it's different. Because the typical story that you hear from boxers is, oh, I was on the streets and boxing saved me from crime and you don't know how rough I was back, you know, all that like cliche stuff. Lawrence Okolie's story is, I was working at McDonald's in Victoria Station in London, right? And I looked at the screen and AJ was beating somebody, I guess it was in the Olympics, and he thought to himself while he was flipping burgers and, you know, doing the fries, he thought to himself, I could do that. So I actually like that story. Yeah, because it's different. You don't hear fighters come out admitting they were working in McDonald's, you know? They all want to have some cool kind of like tough guy background or some, you know, hard luck story from poverty where, you know, like Francis Ngannou, they swam over from the Africa through a sea of sharks. I'm being facetious here. A sea of sharks, and they nearly died 100 times and all that kind of stuff. And look, I know that many fighters have very rough backgrounds, but just from an entertainment perspective, I guess, those stories are so cliche now. Yeah? I like the more mundane stories. I was working in McDonald's. I was flipping burgers with a silly McDonald's uniform on, feeling like a waste man. And I looked up at the screen and this guy called AJ was fighting in the Olympics, and I said to myself, I could do that. I quite like Okolie's story. In terms of the hugging in the ring, horrible over the years. I mean, the worst hug fest was probably the Billum Smith fight. After that, the Matt Yaskin fight. That was an absolute shocker. He should have been disqualified for that fight. For the hugging, and that was crazy. But there have also been some pretty good performances by Lawrence Okolie. And one thing I've always given him credit for is he has a warrior spirit in terms of he's willing to fight the best guys out there. Yeah? He's not like Fury in that regard. Lawrence Okolie was going straight for the jugular early on in his career. He was trying to fight tough guys. So I'll give him credit for that. And even now, moving up to heavyweight, man's calling out Zhang. I mean, I think it's crazy for him to fight Zhang. I think he'll get flattened, but maybe he'll prove me wrong. But he's calling out Zhang. I don't hear nobody else calling him out. So I'll give him credit for that. But shout out to Taylor for the super chat. Comparing, yeah, Fury does hold a lot, but it's not as egregious as Lawrence Okolie's holding. Okolie takes the holding to a whole new level, but Fury definitely relies on holding to get his wind and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Definitely. He relies on that a lot, and Usyk didn't allow him to do it. Usyk showed great technique, resisting clinches. And that's another thing that caused Fury to get tired out, because he's used to being able to manage his way through 12 rounds with a clinch here, a clinch there, lean on the guy. You know, he's usually got a plotter in front of him with 2 left feet, stick a few jabs, mess around a little bit. That's how Fury's been getting through fights for the past 5-6 years. Yeah, been getting through fights like that. Even against Wilder. Wilder wasn't relentlessly on him. He had plenty of time to tie him up and mess around and get his little breather. Usyk doesn't allow you to do that. That's why Tyson Fury gassed out. Okay, getting back to M1 Live Super Chat. Thank you again. He said, Simon Jordan keeps making reference to Fury being past his best. He doesn't afford Usyk the same luxury. That's a great point. And another bugbear of mine. Because it's the ultimate cop-out, isn't it? I saw that they said that on their latest podcast. Spencer Oliver and Simon Jordan were saying to Duke McKenzie, that's their cop-out. They're picking Fury to win. If Fury doesn't win, oh, he was past his best. Hang on, Usyk's the older guy. Usyk's the guy who had, 300 amateur fights? In fact, how about this? Going into their first fight, Tyson Fury was banging on about how Usyk was all worn out because he had 300 amateur fights. You guys remember him saying that? He said Usyk was worn out because he had 300 amateur fights. Usyk is not as good today as he was a few years ago. He's not. You go back, the best Usyk there's ever been at heavyweight was the first AJ fight. He's never been that good since. He wasn't as good in the second AJ fight. He wasn't as good in the Dubois fight. He wasn't as good in the Fury fight. The first AJ fight is the best I've seen Usyk at heavyweight. And I say that because of his head movement. His head movement and foot movement in that first AJ fight was non-stop. He literally didn't stop moving his head. Constant. Against Fury, there was far less head movement. He was relying more on blocking and footwork to avoid the shots. There was way less head movement than we saw in the first AJ fight. Way less. In the first AJ fight, even in the final round, he was moving his head side to side in that kind of metronome motion. Yeah, so as you say, M1 life, Usyk doesn't get afforded that luxury of, well, if he loses, he was past his best. It's only Fury who gets that. The reality is, both of them are past their best. Yeah? Fury's past his best? Yes, he is. So is Usyk. How the hell are you going to be at your best when you're damn near 40 years old? No, Usyk is past his best. He's still fantastically good. And Tyson Fury is still an excellent fighter, but they're not the fighters they once were. Neither of them. But as you say, only Fury gets that luxury. If he loses, oh, well, he was past his best. If Usyk were to lose, oh, see, Fury was the better fighter all along. Honestly, Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver, embarrassing. Embarrassing. Shout out to, is it Anne for the super chat over in Ireland? I'm just going to pronounce her name Anne if it's not Anne. Help me out here and how to pronounce that first name. But he says, do you think Fury believes he won? Or is him saying Usyk won 3 rounds just playing mind games and lying as usual? Respect from Ireland, brother, and respect to you too. Deep down, I don't think Fury believes he won. But as with all human beings, there's a battle, a constant battle between the conscious and the subconscious mind. There's a conflict there a lot of the time. Your conscious mind will be trying to tell you one thing. Your subconscious mind may be telling you something else. So I think that battle's going on with Tyson Fury. I think he's conflicted. His conscious mind is trying to overrule his subconscious. He's trying to convince himself that Usyk only won 3 rounds because it's an absurd notion. He was getting hit with clean shots from round 1 all the way through the fight. He was getting hit consistently with big clean shots. Save 3 rounds in the middle of the fight. He was getting hit with big shots every other round. How on earth could you only give Usyk 3 rounds when that's the case? Just have a look at the slideshow on screen. So no, deep down Fury doesn't believe it, but he's trying to convince himself because he needs a psychological crutch. He needs, and I get it with Fury. As with any fighter, you need something after a loss to use as a psychological crutch so you can build your confidence back up off it. So I get it. It's silly. It's ridiculous. It's not as silly as like Wilder's excuses after he lost to Fury, but it's still very silly and what have you. But I understand what he's doing. He's trying to rebuild his confidence. But as Mike Tyson said, well, he said it in regards to game plans, right? Rather than confidence. But you could use the same for confidence. Everybody's confident until they get punched in the mouth. When you get punched in the mouth and your legs wobble and you get caught early, now all of a sudden the confidence drains from you. Acting like Usyk only won 3 rounds in the first fight. Well, all of a sudden he's piecing you up in the first couple rounds in the rematch. Your legs are wobbling. You sure he only won 3 rounds in the first? That's when those thoughts start flooding into your head. And Tyson Fury is a very strong character mentally. But this, without a doubt, is his toughest test mentally to overcome, to try and overcome. A shout out for the super chat over there in Ireland. Big up every time. Oh, thank you for the comment there. So it's pronounced uncade. Is that how it's pronounced? Uncade. It's the Irish language for the first. You know, one thing I've always liked is Irish people who speak Irish and Welsh people who speak Welsh. And are there any Scottish people that speak Scots Gaelic? I'm not sure, but yeah, I've always liked that. People that keep those languages alive, because it harkens back to, you know, an older period, a tribal period, and all that kind of stuff. So I like that kind of thing. I think of all the old languages, Welsh, correct me if I'm wrong, is the one that is spoken as a first language more so than the others, right? There aren't many Irish people that speak Irish as a first language, but I think there are at least a lot. There are a lot of people in Wales that speak Welsh. A lot of people that speak it every day, all the time. Certain parts of Wales, if you're driving through, you're gonna see all these Welsh language signs. You're gonna think, what in the hell? Where am I? Shout out to Jake. He says, yes, Hatman was a fan of the boxing commentary. Was you a fan of the boxing commentary of Bob Sheridan? I think he had a fantastic voice. Yeah, I love Bob Sheridan. I was definitely a big fan of Bob Sheridan. I thought he was great. The Colonel, Bob Sheridan, with his yellow glasses. I always liked him. I liked his banter with Muhammad Ali, of course. Yeah, I always liked Bob Sheridan. The last time I saw Bob Sheridan commentating, the last I can remember, there may have been some subsequent times, but the last time that sticks in my head was when he was commentating on David Tua's comeback when he fought the fellow New Zealander. Was it the guy called Shane Cameron? And Bob Sheridan did the commentary on that, and that was very entertaining commentary. It also had Jeff Fennick on there, and Jeff Fennick was like siding with Shane Cameron. And there was a moment where Tua hit Shane Cameron when he was already on the deck, because he'd been, you know, floored by a combination from Tua. And I always remember Jeff Fennick said, that should be a disqualification, you know, obviously in an Aussie accent. But yeah, Bob Sheridan was like, I don't know about that. Don't know about the disqualification. But yeah, I always liked the Colonel Bob Sheridan. Definitely liked him. Okay, Labire, thank you for the super chat. He says, you think Fury will look for a way out if he's losing? I've got no reason to think that he would. Tyson Fury's never shown any quit in him up to this point in his career. You know, Tyson Fury's always been a very, very brave man in that boxing ring. Very brave. So, I don't know. I mean, look, Evander Holyfield was very brave, but eventually he quit against Sherman Williams very late on in his career. So, you know, even a guy who was once brave can end up quitting when they're way past it. But I haven't seen anything that would make me think Tyson Fury would do that in this fight. I think if Fury goes out and he gets stopped, he'll go out in his shield. That's what I suspect will happen. You know, if he does lose by stoppage, he'll go out in his shield. I mean, maybe you disagree. Have you seen anything of Fury that makes you think he might decide to look for a way out if he's losing? Maybe you've spotted something I haven't spotted. Andy Hall says Usyk in his face seemed to have no concern that he may have been robbed when the results announced. I still find that weird every time I watch it back. Expand on that. Usyk is somebody who has prevailed as the B-side so many times that I think his faith in God is so strong that he just leaves everything in God's hands. You know, again, you compare Alexander Usyk to Tyson Fury. Usyk's always crossing himself during fights. All the time. The first thing he did after the fight was get down on his knees and look up at the sky or look up at the ceiling, right? Praying to God, getting him through the fight. His faith is very, very strong. Clearly, he, at least with regards to his boxing career, he relies on his faith very, very heavily. And, people of the Christian faith often talk about leaving it in God's hands, letting God take care of everything, doing what you can do, but whatever's out of your hands, you leave it in God's hands. And of course, the decision with the judges is out of his hands. I mean, I remember when Usyk got the decision over AJ in the first fight, and his promoter, Krasuk, looked a little nervous, like they might rob Usyk in that fight. Go watch it before the decision was announced. Krasuk looked a little nervous. In fact, Krasuk actually looked surprised when they got the decision, like he was expecting to get robbed. But Usyk was just like emotionless until the decision was read, and then he kind of cried tears of joy. Because again, I think in his mind, I'm hypothesizing here, in his mind, he's just saying, look, God, if I didn't deserve it, whatever, if I deserved it, you'll give it to me. I'm going to leave it in your hands. I think that's Usyk's thought process, and he's comfortable with that process of just leaving it in God's hands. Okay, only 100,000 Irish people work in the language, me included. 19% of the population is fluent. And all road signs in both English and Irish. What percentage of the Welsh population are fluent in Welsh? I reckon it's higher than that. Or maybe I'm wrong. That's the perception I've always had for years. That the Welsh have really held on to their language more than anyone. Where's Craig at? He would know. Yeah, I want to say the least spoken of the Gaelic languages in the British Isles has got to be Scots Gaelic, right? How many Scottish people actually speak Scots Gaelic? It must be a very small percentage in terms of the ones who are fluent. It must be very small. Stephen Whitemore says, apparently 29% speak Welsh. Okay, so that's a bit higher than the people who are fluent in Irish, but not as high as I thought it would be. But still, 29% speak Welsh. I don't think I've ever met a Scottish person actually that speaks Scots Gaelic, excuse me. I don't think I've ever met one. Cornish isn't widely spoken. Is Cornish spoken at all anymore? In terms of, do people conversate in Cornish? I know there are some people that still know the language, maybe, academics and what have you, but in terms of are there communities in Cornwall where people speak the language on a daily basis? Jelly Mode says, yes, I've been to Cornwall to see family, but only the elderly can still speak it. Okay. Someone says, Aha says, yeah, in Cornwall, quite a lot of people are fluent in it. Linkage says, do the Native Americans still speak their languages? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Native Americans still speak their languages, especially the ones that live on the reservations. Yeah, they all speak their languages. Navajo and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Obviously, not 100% of them, but there's still a substantial proportion of Native Americans that speak their languages. Andy Hall says, if Usyk leaves it in God's hands, he might get robbed in the rematch. I wouldn't be so cool myself, considering he won 9 rounds in the first fight and scored a knockdown and still only won on a split. Yeah, that is very concerning. That's why, I'm not going for Usyk by a big percentage. Some people are saying Fury's only got a 30% chance. Nah, I got to give him a much higher chance than that, all things considered. As you say, the way the first fight went and how desperate the industry is for Fury to win, But I don't think Usyk is going to rest on his laurels. I think he's a perfectionist. And Usyk actually, something that Derek Chisora said in the run-up to the first fight, we tend to think of Tyson Fury being the quote-unquote crazy one, right? But Chisora said he spent some time with Usyk in the lead up to the fight, I think on fight week. And he said Usyk is far more crazy than Fury is. He said Usyk is actually nuts. And what he meant by that is that Usyk trains like no one he's ever seen. He said the type of training that Usyk was doing was absolutely insane. On fight week, he was like out in the Saudi desert cycling, tens and tens of miles, or 100 miles, some crazy amount of miles on fight week. I mean, this guy doesn't have to make weight. What's he doing all that for? He was just saying that Usyk is crazy. And so what you have with Usyk is he's a guy that is used to pushing himself beyond his limits all the time. And that's the polar opposite to Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury is a very, very talented fighter, very talented for a big man. But as the old saying goes, hard work beats talent when talent don't work hard. And although Tyson Fury worked very hard for that last camp, he's a naturally much bigger man, so he's never going to be able to match Usyk for overall stamina and stuff like that. But on top of that, Tyson Fury has abused his body for years. Years and years and years of abusing his body. And that stops you from pushing as consistently to new heights of fitness the way that Usyk does. Usyk is a pure athlete. And he has this obsession with pushing his limits all the time. That's why he and Lomachenko were doing all that, holding their breath underwater. They're always trying to push and push and push and push. It's like an obsession, Fury doesn't have that kind of obsession. Few fighters do, right? But Tyson Fury doesn't have it. And so the point I'm making is I don't see Usyk going in there thinking it's going to be easy. I think Usyk will be very hard on himself as far as how the first fight went. Those middle rounds, he'll never forget getting caught with those shots and getting hurt. He'll never forget that. He'll be going into the rematch obsessed with being better than he was in the first fight. That's his personality type. That's what he does. So I don't think he's going to rest on his laurels. But because the fighting is in his hands, he can control that. When it comes to leaving it in God's hands, it's the stuff he can't control. He can't control what the judges do. And in fact, many people thought that Usyk would move around the ring and box Fury at long range in the first fight. Usyk is often aggressive, and he chose to be aggressive against Fury, perhaps because he knew the industry wanted Fury to win. And so in order to get the W, in order to get his hand raised, he'd have to take the fight to him. Maybe Usyk didn't think he could get the decision moving around. He's not a fool. He knew that the industry wanted Fury AJ. That's what they were going for. He knew that. He didn't have a big promoter behind him. You know, he's not a fool. So, yeah, I think he's going to go into the rematch just as focused as he was first time around, maybe even more so, because he'll have the memory of those middle rounds in his head, and he'll be like, that can't happen to me again. I need to correct that. The adjustments that I made to avoid the uppercut after round 7, I need to have those adjustments in place from round 1. You know, the man is like a scientist in there. 3 weeks after the fight, Usyk is watching the fight back. Or by that point, he'd watched the fight back several times. He said so on Steve Kim's podcast with a pen and a pad, taking down notes. Okay, at this point in the fight, I did this and I made this mistake. That's what the man was doing. How many boxers do you think do that 3 weeks after an undisputed fight? That's why Derek Chisora said this guy's crazy. 3 weeks, I knew he would be doing that. But, you know, 3 weeks after the fight, less than, right? Because it was prior to. He's got his pen and his pad out. He's watching the fight multiple times. He's taking notes. These are the things I need to drill in training camp. The rematch is like 6-7 months away, and he's already got his notepad out. Yeah. And at the same time that Usyk was doing that, Tyson Fury was face planting outside a pub. These guys are so different in terms of their approach to boxing. Tyson Fury is a guy who's very talented. He's an artist. You know, Usyk is like a scientist. Fury's like an artist. Yeah. And artists tend to be more rock and roll than scientists, don't they? And of course, artists can be brilliant. But a lot of the time with artists, they are very inconsistent. And that's what Tyson Fury's like. When he's at his best, he's fantastic. Beautiful boxing. But when he's at his worst, he's terrible. It looks like something that your kid, you know, drew for you with crayons that you put on your fridge with a magnet. Although against Usyk, I thought Fury was very good compared to the Fury we've seen over the past few years. That was the best version of Fury I've seen for many years. But it still wasn't good enough. Can he be better in the rematch? I don't think so. I'm not dismissing it completely, but I don't think so. Not better in terms of fitness. Not better in terms of mind state. I think he can be better tactically. That's what I'll say. But physically, no. Tactically, I think he can be better. Yeah. Shout out to Stephen Whitemore for the super chat. He says, why do you think he is more, or who do you think is more talented, Fury or Usyk? I guess you meant to say. I guess talent is kind of, it's open to interpretation when you say talent, right? But Tyson Fury is less formulaic than Alexander Usyk. The stuff he does in the ring is more instinctive. And as I say, it's more artistic. And in that way, you could say he's more talented, because Usyk is just a guy who is very, 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 very good at the fundamentals. Okay, impeccable fundamentals. On top of that, he's got good athleticism. He's not like a freak athlete, but he does have good athleticism. Better than most. Good balance, so on and so forth. And mentally, he's just an animal. He's a beast. You know, he's a beast. His actions show that. I mean, what kind of guy blows through the cruiserweight division, fighting everybody in their backyard without hesitation, and then he sticks around to take on Bellew as well in his backyard, just to leave no stone left unturned, because Bellew gave up the WBC belt or was stripped of it, didn't lose it in the ring, or whatever it was at the time. And Usyk said, okay, I'll stick around, I'll fight you too. Then moves up to heavyweight, couple of fights to acclimatize, straight in there with AJ. And people thought he didn't look good against Chisora or Chad Witherspoon, and Usyk was like, nope, I've had enough fights, I'm ready. I'm ready to go in there with the best heavyweights. Bear in mind, when Evander Holyfield stepped up to heavyweight, he had something like 6 fights or 7 fights before he fought a top heavyweight, before he fought for the title. Usyk only needed 2. He's like, I'm ready now. Okay. And then after beating AJ, he fights AJ again, beats him again. He doesn't vacate his belts. He says, yeah, I'll fight Dubois, no problem. Beats him too. Then he's going straight for Fury. Fury kicked the can down the road for 2 years. But Usyk wanted it straight. So, you know, Usyk's mindset is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And in that way, I mean, is that a talent? Having a mindset like that? I don't know. A shout out to Stephen Whitemore. Shout out to Sully for the super chat. He says, any advice as a new club bouncer? Should I bulk up? I never bulked up, but I've always been big anyway. I always concentrated more on, obviously I was boxing and just, you know, various other combat, hand-to-hand combat techniques. I found that chokeholds, and I'm not advising you here, okay, because I don't want anything to go wrong. But what I found as a bouncer is that chokeholds were very useful. A lot of the time, chokeholds will be more useful than my boxing ability. The chokeholds. Because when you start, when you get into a scuffle and you're trying to fight somebody, it can be very chaotic. There's other people around. They can pick up a chair or a glass, or, you know, their friends can be with them. Even if it's one guy, if you attempt to fight one guy in a crowded club, right? It can be a messy situation. And so I had discovered when I was a bouncer that just going in hard, pause, going in hard and just getting someone in a chokehold as quickly as possible, you can get them. And again, I'm not advising here. I'm just telling you what I did. Yeah. I would get people in a chokehold, and within 15 seconds, the guy's semi-conscious, if that. And that could have been a massive, you know, a massive fracas if I'd gone in there and tried to put an arm around him and it turned into a fist fight. So when there was a really troublesome, it's not like I was just going up randomly putting people in chokeholds, but when there was a guy who was being aggressive, who didn't want to leave, who was either already violent or threatening to get violent, I just go straight in with a chokehold. That's it. No messing about. And there's a little struggle while he's in the chokehold, then he's semi-conscious and he's out the door. That's why I'm not advising you to do that, because it can be very dangerous. Yeah, let me just make that clear. It can be very dangerous putting people in chokeholds, especially people who are already drunk and high. It can be very dangerous. I did it because I was more concerned about my safety than his. All right. And after you've been in a few Barneys in the clubs and the pubs and wherever, you think to yourself, I can't be doing this every night. It also depends where you're working, depends on the clientele, because I worked in some rough places where there's a lot of troublemakers, and the doors were a lot rougher back then. You know, in the early 2000s, they were a lot rougher back then than today. So maybe I'm giving you like outdated advice, or in fact, it's not even advice. I'm just telling you what I did. Maybe what I did wouldn't be appropriate for today. Because back then, nightclub doors were run by hard men. Hard men, gangs even, who were running nightclub doors. Yeah, there was a security firm, but security firm was often just the front, you know, for a different kind of firm. So that was the nightclub industry when I was in it. And it was actually during a transition phase, because when I was a bouncer, that's when they introduced the SIA badges. Yeah, before that, there was loads of, you know, rascals working the doors, people who had records as long as your arm, you know? And they introduced the SIA to kind of get that element out. It's not completely gone, of course. But yeah, it was all about cleaning up the industry, so to speak. But yeah, so I worked in both worlds. The world where they were trying to clean it up and the world where it was still very naughty. And yeah, in that world, I don't want to say it was anything goes, but you know, yeah, it was colorful. So I would say learn some grappling. Yeah, if you do MMA or anything like that, I think it can be very useful. Boxing, I think that kind of stuff is going to be more useful to you than just bulking up and doing loads of weights. Yeah, a lot of bouncers like to bulk up and get big because they think it intimidates people, and it does intimidate a lot of people. But when it goes off, you don't want to be the guy who's big for nothing, because punters will come back to the same place and they'll say, yeah, see that big steroid guy? Yeah, he's got a glass jaw. He's nothing. He's nobody. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the guy who's big for nothing. And you'll have more confidence anyway if you, you know that you've got fighting skills, a good all-round skill set, boxing, MMA, you know, some holds and whatever. You'll feel more confident doing that than you will bulking up. Or you'll have more genuine confidence. Because, you know, I know when guys take steroids, they get really confident because of what it does to you in terms of your brain chemistry. But in practical terms, yeah, you can be a big steroid head and still get filled in by some little guy. So yeah, I would advise learn some MMA, some holds and stuff like that, and prioritize that more so than getting big. Because, you know, a lot of the time confidence will make people respect you even more than your size. Yeah, just the fact that you exude confidence. And when you've got like experience in combat sports, you're going to exude confidence. A shout out to K Solly for the super chat. Shout out again. From Ireland, I can't stand that fool and fraud Teddy Atlas. Damn, strong words for Teddy. Strong words for Teddy. I mean, Teddy does like the sound of his own voice. When he's having a conversation, you couldn't really call it a conversation, could you, with Ken Rideout? Doesn't let the guy speak, doesn't let the guy get a word in edgeways. I do like some of Teddy's breakdowns, personally. What's up, Jay? Over there in Australia. Shout out. Waved says, Hatman, who did you enjoy more, Nigel Benn or Chris Eubank? In the ring, Nigel Benn, without a shadow of a doubt. Out of the ring, Chris Eubank, without a shadow of a doubt. Joe M says, don't choke a drunk guy, low pulse already, recipe for disaster. I'm not going to disagree with you, but I did do it. I did do it. I did do it because it was effective. But like you say, I'm not going to advise anyone else to do it because it is very dangerous. Very dangerous. I took the chance and I was lucky that it didn't go badly wrong. But when I went in and choked people, it ended the situation so fast. Because prior to that, I was scrapping with people, you know? when I started choking people, it was over so quick. I was like, well, all that hassle that I could have had, and instead, 10, 15 seconds, it's done. Now, obviously, it's not always practical, because if there are multiple people, you're trying to choke someone, you're going to get mashed up probably by their friends. So it's not always practical. Sometimes you have to start throwing blows. But it was like one guy. Maybe there's just one of you. I worked plenty of places where it was just me. Like if you're working in a pub, it's just you. In some cases anyway, back then, you're the only security there. If there's some guys causing problems, getting violent, getting irate, I'll go in there and get him in a chokehold. Fast asleep in seconds. Or at least, if not fast asleep, then, nearly. And the first time I did it, I remember there was this guy who was causing trouble. And I went in, grabbed him in this chokehold. And he was upstairs and I was going to walk him downstairs in a chokehold. I'd never choked anyone before. And I got him in this chokehold and I was squeezing so tight because, the adrenaline's there. I'm expecting a big scuffle. I squeezed in his chokehold so tight. And as I was walking him down the stairs, I got about halfway down the stairs and he was dead weight. Literally within seconds, this guy flopped. I was like, wow. I had to drag him along the floor out. Because he was out cold in seconds. I was amazed because this guy was all full of beans, right? Irate and ready to fight the world. And I snuck up behind him and got him in a chokehold so quick. This guy was gone in seconds. I was like, wow, it's that easy. Yeah, because this was in the days when I certainly wasn't into MMA. MMA was nowhere near as big then as it is now, UFC and what have you. So people weren't really, well, bouncers were doing chokeholds and what have you, but it wasn't really like a pop culture thing back then to be doing arm locks and chokeholds. It was still very much fisticuffs. So I'd never even, attempted to choke anyone. I'd had street fights growing up and all sorts of Barneys and whatever, but I'd never choked anyone before. I don't think ever. I've done all sorts of other stuff, bitten people, head-butted people, elbowed people. Had I ever kicked anyone? Wasn't really a big kicker. But I've done all sorts of stuff. I'd never choked anyone up until that point. And it was like a revelation to me. Wow, my job can be so much easier sorting out trouble. Just going in, you got to sneak in, obviously, right? Go in, you see the things kicking off, you go for the ringleader. I got him. Jackie Boy Johnson says eye gouges. No, I never did that. Never did that. That's a bit deep, isn't it? That's a bit deep. I mean, if I was in a position where it was that way, or if it was his eyes or mine, I'd take his. But no, I never went in there with the intention of trying to do something as grisly as that. Never. Somebody threatened to gouge my eyes out, though, when I was a bouncer. There was a guy who I got in a chokehold and I bit him on his shoulder. Right where the shoulder meets the neck. I bit him as hard as I could because this guy was like crazy and a massive troublemaker. And the bouncer who I was working with was actually scared of this guy. So he was over there talking to him and the guy was getting irate and I'm like, okay, my fellow bouncer's about to get chinned here. So I went straight in. I grabbed this guy in a chokehold from behind, right? I'm taller than him. I literally lifted him off his feet in his chokehold. There was nothing supporting him, just me grabbing him, arm around his neck, lifted him off his feet, and I'm walking him towards the fire exit, right? Must be, I don't know, 10, 15 meters or something. Now, I was expecting he would be maybe like semi-conscious when I got there, because I'm biting him and I'm choking him at the same time because I want to shock him. Yeah, because that's one of the things I found worked in those kind of situations where you're dealing with a really violent person. If you shock them, it can, you know, they can almost freeze, you know, when you put some like big pain on them out of the blue, which they're not expecting, you can shock them. So that's what I was aiming to shock the guy and also choke him. And shock and awe. When I got to the fire exit and let go, this guy immediately turned around and he grabbed a glass from somewhere. He came to throw a glass at me. I was like, wow, is this guy high or what? Because the chokehold seemed to have no effect on this guy. I was like, wow. So anyway, we closed the fire. This guy threw a glass, it smashed. He was kicking the fire exit. We closed the door, went round to the front because we knew he was going to come around the front entrance. And he was there saying, yeah, I'm going to gouge your eye out. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. You know, yeah, he was crazy. And I was there with another bouncer at the front. And the other bouncer actually knew him because the guy wanted me to come around the corner in the alleyway and have a fight. And the guy was like, no. The other bouncer, who was the head bouncer at the place, he's like, no, stay where you are. Stay where you are. And the guy was like, yeah, come around here, I'll gouge your eye out and this, that, and the other. He was crazy, that guy. He was crazy. I'm sure he would have attempted it. He was crazy. And that's the weird thing, right? Because I saw that guy many times afterwards at other clubs, and he actually came and apologized to me. And I was always weirded out by stuff like that. Like, we just had a big Barney and I choked you and bit you and you threw a glass at me and threatened to gouge my eye out. But the next time I see you, you're like, apologize. I was like, is this a ruse? Is he trying to lull me into a false sense of security? Because if I'd gone that deep with someone and I'm talking about gouging their eye out and this, that, and the other, I don't think I could be cool with someone after that. Do you know what I mean? I think it's got a bit too far. But he apologized and he was like, you know, I was drunk or whatever. I don't know what he said, but I can't remember what he said. But yeah, that always kind of weirded me out that we took it that far. And then he was just like, oh yeah, it's all right. Maybe he just didn't want to get barred from all the clubs in the area, you know, because he was barred from quite a few, but there was some of them that was working on where he was still allowed in. And so maybe he just didn't want to get barred from everywhere and he was willing to squash the beef. I don't know. Shout out to Joseph King for the super chat. He said, what fight ends faster, Jake Paul versus Dubois or Golovkin versus Shields? She previously called him out. Definitely Golovkin versus Shields. Clarissa Shields, she's got such a massive chip on her shoulder. It's really tiring and boring listening to her. So I don't listen to her. I don't pay attention to any. I just leave her screaming in the dark, you know, because she's so silly. She's so delusional. You know, you look at her sparring with men and it's clear that the men are holding back and she acts like they're not holding back. And that one time when that guy who was a journeyman dropped her, she started having a go. I mean, come on. She's living in a fantasy world where she thinks she can beat men. Put her in there against the journeyman, she get wiped out in a couple rounds. I mean, come on. I don't pay any attention to that broad. To use an old American expression, I don't pay any attention to that silly broad. Jackie Boy says, who would win in a fight between Shields and Sonny Edwards? Well, I'm sure Sonny Edwards would win, but You guys remember when Sonny Edwards asked Clarissa Shields out? That was one of the weirdest, most cringe moments in boxing history. When Sonny Edwards asked Clarissa Shields, "Can I take you out?" I was so weirded out by that. Ugh. What a scenario. I mean, what a scenario. The Odd Couple was putting it mildly. Absolutely bizarre. Ardil says Clarissa would treat Sonny like Lickle Man, put him through the letterbox. She could put him through the keyhole. Never mind the letterbox, as skinny as he is, he would thread right through the keyhole. Yeah. Who's actually interested in this Sonny Edwards Yafai fight? I get the Yafais mixed up. Gamal, what are they called? There's so many different Yafais. Which Yafai is it? Is it the youngest one who Eddie Hearn was hyping up as the future of boxing? Is that the one who's fighting Sonny Edwards? Anyway, I asked the question to just tell you that I've got no interest in the fight at all. Zero. Exactly that, Martin Wood Wilkinson. 12-round tap fest. I'm not interested in tap fests. It is what it is. I'm not saying Sonny Edwards don't have talent, but, you know, these guys can't bust a grape. So, 12-round tap fest. Okay, it's Galal Yafai. There's so many Yafais. And their first names are all similar. You guys remember when they had those memes? Frank Warren bingo. Eddie Hearn bingo. You remember those that were going around on social media back in the days? The Eddie Hearn bingo, the Frank Warren bingo. And obviously, each of the squares had a word or a phrase that each guy would be well known for saying. So on Frank Warren's bingo, there was, what was on there now? Conning the fans, do me a favor, Carl Frock. Always calls him Carl Frock, not Carl Froch. Muhammad Ali. StubHub was on it. But on Eddie Hearn's one, there was Galal Yafai. I said, back in the days, he couldn't go a single interview without mentioning one of the Yafais. It was just constant Yafai this, Yafai that. Apples and pears. That's another one for Eddie Hearn. Apples and pears, apples and pears. Ardil says, Hatman, do you watch Proper Boxing? I find him quite funny personally. I think Proper Boxing has got a great voice, and I think he's got a great formula, and he's managed to tap into the mainstream boxing market fantastically well. And that's not a diss, by the way. When I say mainstream boxing market, there are plenty of hardcores that watch him, but he's been able to transcend the hardcores, which is what my channel and most other of these type of channels do, right? We've got mainly a hardcore boxing audience. Proper Boxing has got the hardcore boxing audience, and he's got a mainstream audience as well, because he's got his formula right. So I think he's got a great formula. I don't watch his videos on a regular basis, I have to be honest. I don't have time to watch loads of stuff. But what I will say is that, yeah, he's done fantastically well. The way he puts his videos together with the humor and the writing and all that kind of stuff, yeah, he's got that formula nailed down. And it's not an easy formula to do. You know, you have to have the right cadence and the right voice and the right, you know, you have to know what you're doing. And he's done fantastically well. K Sully, no comment. That's all I'll say. No comment. Ardil says, would you collaborate with Ade? Maybe at some point. You know, we were gonna collaborate back in the days before he got his job with Sky, I think. So maybe we'll see. Cause yeah, Ade first started working, to my knowledge, in Africa as a boxing commentator. I think that's where he got his first commentary gigs, was in Africa, in South Africa, I think maybe in West Africa as well. And then from that, he was able to get a job at Sky. He was only at Sky quite briefly. And then he got the job at DAZN, and he's gone from strength to strength. Linkage says, have you ever read any boxing books? Yeah, I read quite a few back in the days, but in recent years, no, none. So back in the days, back in the 90s, I read Lennox Lewis's biography or autobiography, I forget which. So I read that. That might have come out around 93. It was when Lewis was still undefeated. And it's got Lewis on the front when he still had his flat top. And he's got his WBC belt in front of him and he's like smiling with his arms folded. So I read that. I read Nigel Benn's, I think it was an autobiography. I had several boxing encyclopedias growing up, big, thick, you know, heavy boxing encyclopedias. I'm sure there's some others. I've read several boxing autobiographies. Muhammad Ali. I think it was a Thomas Hauser one that I read. I'm pretty sure I had a Mike Tyson book. Almost certain I had a Mike Tyson book. So yeah, I've read a few, but way back in the days, definitely not recently. Mindsmith says, what do you enjoy reading most these days? What do I read these days? I read a lot of books on history, a lot of random stuff, you know, from the 1800s. I've read several books about, several books that were written by British anthropologists in the 1800s. Okay. So I've read those kind of random books, historical books, anthropological books. You know, I've read various history books about Africa. What else have I been reading? Books about psychology. I've been into psychology for years. Always read stuff about psychology. In fact, give me a second. Let me go and have a look at some of these books I got on the shelf here. All right, picked a couple books. I've got the bookmarks in them that I'm kind of reading through. So one of them I've actually read before, but I'm reading through again, which is called Program to Kill by David McGowan. The subtitle is The Politics of Serial Murder. I'm reading the Mothman Prophecies again, because I like weird stuff. Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. What else I got here? Okay, I've already read this book. I might read it again. It is called The Queen's Conjurer, The Life and Magic of Dr. John Dee. He was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I in her royal court. Very interesting book about his life and times, because there's a lot of like sensationalist stuff about John Dee. This book is like more dry. You know, it's not written in a sensationalist fashion. It's just written kind of dry, which I prefer. And it's very interesting. The Life and Magic of Dr. John Dee. The world that they lived in back then in Britain in the Renaissance period was, yeah, quite a world. And he had a very, very interesting life based upon what it says in this book. So yeah, The Queen's Conjurer, The Life and Magic of Dr. John Dee. Another book here. It's got a very long title. The Memoirs of the Secret Services of John Mackey. Another book here, Falsehood in Wartime. Okay, this is by a guy called Arthur Ponsonby. Arthur Ponsonby. Falsehood in Wartime. And the subheading is containing an assortment of lies circulated throughout the nations during the Great War. It's basically a book which details all the propaganda that was spread by the Allies during World War I. So that's Falsehood in Wartime. There's another book here, which, can I even mention it on YouTube? I don't know. I definitely won't mention the subheading, but it's written by John F. Kennedy Jr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. All right, so RFK Jr. wrote this book, and it is called The Real Anthony Something. Fill in the blanks. So that's a couple of the books that I'm reading right now. The RFK Jr. book called The Real Anthony. The Real Anthony. I don't want to trigger the algorithm with any of these names. Jackie Boy Johnson says Mothman Prophecies was based on real happenings, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Bizarre happenings. And if you've seen the interviews with the people who say they saw this thing, I mean, I like to think I'm fairly good at judging people's character, and when they're talking about stuff, being able to tell whether they're lying. And lots of people who I've seen over the years on television programs, documentaries, who claim to have seen entities, ghosts and aliens and all that kind of stuff. In most instances, I look at these people and I'm like, you are absolutely full of because their body language and their story just don't convince me. But with that Mothman thing, I don't know what really happened there, but the people who I saw interviewed from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, I mean, they must be incredible actors because they seem very sincere when they're talking to me. Maybe you guys would feel different, but they seem very, very sincere. Some of these people are old, you know, and that kind of intrigued me, that these people were so sincere, or appeared to be so sincere. So I looked into it, and you know, the book is very interesting. John Keel is an interesting character himself. And the movie's actually quite good. There's a movie with Richard Gere, about called The Mothman Prophecies. It's actually quite a good book. It's not, I mean, quite a good movie. Obviously, it's not as extensive as the book. The book has got a lot more detail and a lot more backstory, and it's a bit different. But the movie's worth watching. It's good. It's good. But yeah, the book is quite bizarre. So, I don't know, is it all a bunch of people who are like small town hicks who have decided to collectively come up with a lie to boost tourism to their little backwater town? I don't know. Or is there something weird going on? Was their water supply spiked with LSD? You know, the intelligence agencies in America back then, they used to like to do a lot of weird stuff, experimenting on people and putting LSD in water supplies and all that kind of thing. Did they do that in Point Pleasant, West Virginia? Did they spike their water supply with a hallucinogen? If they did, then how could everybody be seeing the same entity? If it was an LSD thing, you'd think that people would be seeing different stuff, right? So I've got no idea. All I can tell you is it's very weird, and I'm fascinated by stuff like that. Shola says John D. heavy. Yeah. It's an interesting book about John D. and his life, you know, because a lot of John D's writings were destroyed. So this book, let me just get it again. The Queen's Conjurer is based upon some of his writings that were found, as well as other sources about his life and what have you. He and this character called Edward Kelly, who became a figure in John Dee's life later on. And if this stuff is accurate, because you never know, right? Old documents could have been written by God knows who. But apparently the documents that formed the basis of this book have been verified as genuine, authentic, for whatever that's worth. So let's just take it at face value and say it's all authentic. We know John Dee. There's lots of records of him being an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. But his life was, to say that his life was extraordinary is a massive understatement. In fact, I'm surprised they haven't made more well-known movies about him, because honestly, the movies you could make out of this book would be crazy. You could make all kind of series. In fact, you could make a fantastic television series about John Dee. Yeah, because I'm telling you, his life was extraordinary. He's a Renaissance man, and he doesn't get the same kind of press, the same kind of notoriety as, the Leonardo da Vinci's and people like that. But arguably, he was just as influential in his own way. Really, John Dee kind of laid the groundwork for the British Empire. And, lots of people have got lots of negative things to say about the British Empire, including myself. But if we take the morality out of it, right? Building an empire is still a difficult thing to do. It's not easy going and conquering countries and coming up with the actual military prowess to be able to do it in the first place. Yeah. So if you're just looking at it in practical terms, John Dee, you could say, was like the guy who laid the groundwork for the British Empire, because before, up until that point, Britain was quite a poor country. Yeah, relative to other countries in the world, Britain was quite poor at that stage. The economy was suffering, and Britain was a bit of a backwater on the edge of Europe. There were other parts of Europe that were doing far better and were far more prominent. Britain was maybe, I don't know, the equivalent of Mexico or Colombia or something like that today in terms of its place, its ranking in the world. And so John Dee came up with a blueprint, basically, of how to elevate Britain as a country in the world, elevate its standing and become a power, become a major force in the world. Now, obviously, the empire didn't come to fruition until, you know, many years after his death, but the seeds were sown with John Dee's work and the groundwork he put down. He sowed the seeds for it. He came up with all sorts of ideas and strategies and all this type of stuff, which was used by subsequent monarchs and what have you. I mean, for example, Britain's Navy. He came up with how to, you know, bolster the Navy strength, because at the time, obviously, you had the Spanish Armada and what have you that were ruling the high seas. Eventually, it became the British Navy that ruled the high seas. And John Dee laid the groundwork for a lot of that to happen. So in this book, they show you how that groundwork was laid and the ideas he came up with and the successes he had and why Queen Elizabeth I had him as such a close, trusted advisor for so long. And, you know, the section about Edward Kelly is very, you know, very interesting as well, because in fact, this Edward Kelly character is probably even more interesting than John Dee himself, especially when Edward Kelly went into Europe, into Bohemia, and allegedly he was turning base metal into gold, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Edward Kelly, a very, very interesting, mysterious character. Edward Kelly apparently always wore a hat because the top of his ears had been clipped. And that was a common punishment back in those days in Britain for things like theft and I think forgery and stuff like that. They clip the top of your ears off. So Edward Kelly had like the tops of his ears missing, but he always wore a hat to cover him. So yeah, very interesting book. Very interesting. The Queen's Conjurer. All right, peeps, I'm going to leave it right here. Thank you guys for joining me on this live. Special thanks to everyone who donated via Super Chat. Much appreciated. Take care, be good. And I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out.